Breon, right? I'm Breon. Okay, yeah, sorry. I just want to make sure who I'm after. Yes, Beth Promise. Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. Stand right here. There we go. Excellent.
And I'm gonna give you guys some advice if you don't
Yeah, you can come.
So we just
That's fine. Sort of the
Good.
What's your name?
all right.
It's like on your wedding day.
Sit down before you
Are we calling to order?
All right, good afternoon.
All right, we're going to begin, everyone. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. My name is Representative Breon Curran. My pronouns are they, she. I represent District 36B in White Bear Lake, Vadnais Heights, and parts of Ramsey and Washington counties. And I'm also the chair of the Minnesota Queer Legislators Caucus. Today, ahead of an unnecessary debate on House File 12, Minnesota Democrats are unified in sending a clear message to our trans, non-binary, and two-spirit community. You are loved, you are seen, and you deserve to play with your peers. Minnesota has always led the nation in standing up for LGBTQIA2S+ neighbors, and Democrats will do it again today. We will not allow Republicans to discriminate and bully children for wanting to play. All children deserve to play. We will not be complacent with this hateful and dangerous anti-trans rhetoric. Republican politicians in Minnesota are falling directly in line with Trump's extreme and cruel agenda by prioritizing political theater and burning valuable legislative hours on targeting our youth and vulnerable Minnesotans, rather than addressing the real and imminent issues facing our state. The House floor is meant for vetted bills with enough support to pass. Minnesota deserves better than leadership that wastes time on vindictive crusades while bipartisan bills pile up and real problems go unsolved. Minnesota DFLers are laser focused on building a state that belongs to everyone, with a tent large enough to welcome all who value basic humanity. And with that, I'll concede my time so community members can share their stories and we can focus on what truly matters, uplifting their voices. And we'll start with Beth Gromish.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Beth Gromish. I am a parent of a trans child. Actually, they're a young adult now in college and doing really well and thriving. I live in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, and my child did participate in sports when they were in high school. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself and my child. So my child was born as a female, and they actually transitioned to a male in middle school and high school. This is a really difficult time in this country, but also just middle school and high school period is always difficult for all of us. And, people are trying to find themselves, and this is what my child did, is they found themselves. They go by they, them, and he, him pronouns now. They tried to really struggled at first, really tried to figure out who they were and struggled until they really were able to transition. And then they really felt peace and stability after that. Later in high school, they chose to participate in Ultimate Frisbee. And I don't know if you know Ultimate Frisbee at all, but we need to take a playbook from that sport. What a great inclusive sport. It's called the spirit of the game. And that's exactly what they do, is they participate, anybody's welcome, and the students are actually the officiates. And I think that's amazing. That's what we should be doing, is allowing kids to play. Now, they would not describe themselves as an athlete, but they were still on the team, and they loved it, and they chose that team. They chose the boys' team, and they were able to have a sense of community and belonging, and it was affirming to them. I look back at my high school experience, and I was a female athlete, and this bill troubles me for many different reasons. the biggest thing that it's doing is trying to others, trying to other the people that are transgender and marginalize them. As a female athlete, I think this is even more worrying as well. Because anybody that's less than that feminine ideal, that they're, tall, that they're muscular, maybe they wear their hair short, they're going to be scrutinized for being true female or scrutinized for their gender, which is just really unfair. This is all about sports, fun, and inclusion. So bodies really come in all shapes and sizes, and female athletes that are blessed shouldn't, have this scrutiny, and it's just really not making them safe by having this bill. It's not supporting them. This really feels like a self-inflicted wound in a way. This is a non-issue. This is something that we should allow kids to play. This is, not an issue. It's not a problem. My kid thrived in school and didn't have any problems by being a trans athlete. So it really, to end it, it really creates a division. It fosters prejudice and does not support women in sports or allowing kids to be their true, authentic selves. When you look at other states, this has gone poorly, and it really has harmed female athletes. I believe in Minnesota, and I think that we can be better. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Maggie Davis, and I proudly serve the Robbinsdale and Burnsville school districts as an educator. As a biology educator and career swimming and diving coach, I feel compelled to speak out against this legislation. And in my personal view, this bill is not about protecting fairness in sports or upholding integrity. Instead, it is a calculated effort to sow division, to amplify fear, and to distract from the larger issue of defunding education. Let's be clear about this. The biggest threat to high school sports right now is the $330 billion cut to the federal education budget that's moving through Congress. Congress, if the GOP passes that budget, Minnesota schools will need to cut hundreds of millions in spending. As an educator, that scares me. What's going to happen with our students? And since we're speaking about athletics, some sports won't survive. Today's question isn't about who should be playing sports, but whether sports will be able to even be played. I hope that Minnesotans see this bill and similar bills that are moving through state houses across the country for what they are. They're attempts to exploit unfamiliarity with trans people and to distract from the GOP plan to gut the federal services to most Americans and that they depend upon. Why? To pay for more tax breaks for the billionaires. However, let's transition that into today's topic and say that there's two key perspectives on why this legislation is not only a violation of public policy, but it's also a degradation in human rights. First, this bill seeks to prohibit transgender athletes from competing in girls' sports, directly undermining the protections established by Title IX. The federal law which prohibits sex-based discrimination in the educational program that's receiving federal funding. The Minnesota Department of Education has made it clear that schools must adopt policies prohibiting harassment and violence, ensuring a safe and inclusive environment for every student. This bill, however, contradicts those principles by targeting transgender youth and attempting to roll back protections that have been in place for decades. And secondly, as a coach and educator with a master's degree in biology, I can confidently say that the chromosomes do not determine athletic success. It is determined by hard work, dedication, and the support of our coaches and teammates. Over my decade-long career in training athletes of all genders, I have seen firsthand about what matters most is the athlete's commitment to their craft, their coachability, and their drive to achieve. This bill is rooted in fear. Fear of diversity, fear of progress, fear of recognizing the inherent worth of every individual. By targeting transgender athletes, this legislation not only harms transgender youth, but it also diminishes the value of all female athletes. It sends a message that our achievements are somehow less valid unless we exclude others. This is not the message that we should be sending to our young people. Remember, student athletes are students first, and they are listening. It's time to move beyond fear and division and embrace the diversity that makes our communities stronger. I urge our legislators to reject this bill and to reinforce Minnesota as a sanctuary state. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce Kara Cowell, student advocate and record holder with St. Cloud State in swimming.
Hi everyone, my name is Kara Cowell and I'm a student, an advocate, and a lifelong athlete. The opportunity to compete in swimming at the collegiate level is what brought me to Minnesota, and it's the sense of belonging and commitment to justice that I found here that made me want to stay. Growing up in competitive swimming, I spent more days inside the pool than outside of it, and I know firsthand how sports push you to be your best self. That's why I'm here today, to reinforce the importance that every young person has the opportunity to compete, belong, and thrive in sports. Athletics offers so many benefits, from physical to mental health to educational success and self-confidence. Trans women and girls deserve the same access to these benefits. This bill, however, subjects young athletes to scrutiny about their bodies, instead of focusing on how to create more opportunities to support those who do want to participate in sports. Policies like this don't protect women's sports. They undermine it by suggesting that our victories only matter if we exclude others. That's not the sport I know, and that's not the sport that shaped me. I'm proud to stand with trans athletes today because they are valued, they deserve to be here, and every student should have the chance to experience the same joy, challenge, and success that has given me and so many others belonging in sports. When we show up for practice every day, what matters is our dedication, our perseverance, and our love for the game. Sports teach us to push our limits, support each other, and compete with integrity. Most importantly, they remind us that every athlete deserves to compete as their true self every day. We can advocate for fairness and inclusion at the same time. We can celebrate the hard work of all athletes without taking away opportunities from others. I've made Minnesota my home because I believe in our state's strong record of protecting the rights of all Minnesotans, including our trans siblings. Inclusion isn't just the right thing to do, it's what makes sports stronger. I'll continue fighting to ensure every athlete has the same opportunity to be seen, heard, and valued as I did, because that's what gets us anywhere in the first place.
My name is Kat Rohn. I use they and she pronouns. I'm executive director of Outfront Minnesota, our state's largest LGBTQ advocacy organization. Sports in the state are thriving, and Minnesota has long been a leader in our country for athletics participation, particularly for girls and women, not in spite of, but because of our longstanding commitments to inclusion and support. It's something that we should be proud of as Minnesotans, and today we hope to preserve those opportunities. Today's bill is not just about sports, and it's not just about kids. It's about trying to redefine the role our bodies play in shaping our lives. And it's an invitation to greater scrutiny for all of us who don't fit neatly in. We all deserve the chance to play the sports we love, and we all deserve to be ourselves, free from scrutiny, bullying, and harassment. That's the promise we've made in Minnesota, and it's a promise we'll work to keep. And I'm proud to introduce trans athlete and good friend, Chris Mosier. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Chris Mosier. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm a transgender athlete and activist working for gender liberation in sports and beyond. I'm also the founder of transathlete.com, which is the leading resource about trans inclusion and policies in sports at various levels of play. So I'm speaking to you today as both a professional athlete and as an expert in this field. 10 years ago, I became the first transgender man to make a men's U.S. national team right here in Minnesota. And since then, I've become an 8-time member of Team USA, a 5-time men's national champion, and a men's All-American in my sport of duathlon, which is run, bike, run, because it's important to say that. Yeah, everyone is like, oh. At a very young age, I had a strong sense of who I was, but long before I had the language to share that with other people, I grew up playing girls' and women's sports. Sport was my safe place. It was how I found my friends, my community, and my social life. On the court and the field was where I felt the most comfortable and the most like myself. So sport was an essential part of my upbringing and my life, and it continues to be so today. It taught me things about goal setting, communication, dedication, perseverance, leadership, and supporting others. In high school, when I struggled to find myself and understand my place in the world, sports quite literally saved my life. And my participation in sports as a high school student athlete certainly shaped me into who I am today. It forced me to focus on my academics to make sure that I could continue to play the sports that I loved. It required me figuring out good time management skills so that I could balance playing 3 sports, doing clubs and activities, and volunteering, and having good grades. It anchored my own self-confidence, my sense of self, and myself as a member of my school community. Now, I don't remember my team's standings now. It was a long time ago. And I couldn't tell you how many points I scored in my greatest games, although I believe I still hold a few school records. What I do remember is laughing with my friends on the bus rides home from away games. And I remember our playlists before the games, listening to playlists and making silly dances long before TikTok existed. I remember feeling a sense of pride and community when I would see my teammates in the hallways wearing our team shirts on game days. This is what youth sports is about. Through my own experience and nearly 15 years of mentoring transgender students and their families, I can tell you that this is a common experience across the board. Transgender students participate in sports for the same reasons as everyone else: to challenge ourselves, to improve our fitness, to be a part of a team, and most of all, to have fun. Excluding trans students from participation deprives us of the opportunities available to our peers, and it sends the message that we are not worthy of full and social lives. And we will not allow that to happen here in Minnesota. When I made Team USA for the first time right here, my goal was to make it easier for every transgender student who came after me. I will hope that the fight that I had to fight to be able to participate authentically as myself, that no other athlete would have to fight that fight. But here we are, a decade later, in a new, more hateful version of that fight. And while I've been able to be a possibility model for many in our community, we're still facing this fight. As it was mentioned, Minnesota is a national leader in sports for women and girls, and it's also a leader in human rights. But while Minnesota is a leader in inclusion, it is not immune to the hateful and harmful rhetoric and culture wars that we're seeing right now. There's literally no other way to say it. HF12 is political theater. Transgender people are the go-to target for lawmakers right now, looking to score cheap political points instead of actually doing their jobs and serving their constituents. In Minnesota and across our country, trans people deserve full and equal participation in all aspects of public life, and that includes in sports. You know, despite the daily attacks on me and my community, I love being trans. I think trans people are magic, and trans people are a gift to this world. Transgender people are real. We exist, and we will continue to exist. There has never been a world without transgender people in it. And Minnesota and our whole entire country and the world is better because of it. To the transgender youth who may see this, I want you to know that you are loved, You are valued and you belong here. Not just here in Minnesota, but here in this world. And I will continue to fight as long as I need to make sure that you have the chance to live as your authentic self and play the sports that you love, just like I did. Thank you.
All right. Bonjour, everybody. My name is Representative Leisha Kozlowski. Whoops, knocked your microphone off. It's okay, I'm real loud. I use they, them pronouns, and I represent 8B, beautiful Duluth, Minnesota. I'm here as a proud co-founder of our Queer Caucus, as our co-chair of our Posse Caucus, and also as a non-binary and the first two-spirit person, not only in the Minnesota House, but in any state, as any state representative in the country. And I say that not as a point of pride, but as a point of there needs to be much more work done and why it's so important that we're in these spaces and that we're here with our community and with our colleagues united. I want to send a message to everybody. While I don't hold lots of records as an athlete growing up, I've got some other ones. I share a similar sentiment. You know, as a kid, Indigenous kid who grew up in the streets of Duluth, I really found my outlet and my safe space through sport, through belonging, in confusion of who I am and where I fit in the world, soccer and basketball. And that turned into coaching and reffing and going on to supporting students in higher education in the work that I've done. That turned into running ultra marathons, which I haven't run a 50-mile in a while, but I promise I did it. I similarly know the sting of a tough loss, but also the joy and the pride of figuring out, you know, how to win, how to work together, how to have self-determination. And I also found an outlet to who I was as a two-spirit, non-binary person through sport. As an Indigenous person, two-spirit, I am no stranger, as we all here, standing in the face of 500 years of what has been colonial violence, and some of the first attacks were on two-spirit and trans people. And not unlike HF 12, which is not a bill about fairness in sports, but is in fact a bill to bully trans girls and non-binary kids and to eradicate us from public life. It is not our kids who are a problem. It is bullying. It is the focus of continuing to move us out of restrooms and locker rooms and try to say that there are only two genders, which we know is not true. And just as our kids did not stop being Native or two-spirit just because you cut our hair or you took our language, I can assure you that our children will not stop being transgender just because you try to remove us from sports. And so there's a lot more to say, and we'll leave my heart out on the House floor tonight and just ask that we allow our kids to leave their hearts out on the field, on the courts. And I just want to say to trans kids listening from home, wherever you're at, that no one gets to debate your existence as a trans, non-binary, or two-spirit person. We have a lot of adults and a lot of politicians who are talking about our bodies and about our identities and trying to shape and box in what we get to do with our life and our future and what it is that we came to this earth for. And so you are valid however you are, and it's not up for debate, period. And we are united and clear that no one gets to tell us who you are, or bully or box you in, and we're not going to stop fighting. And so I'll say that you have to come through us to get to the trans kids in Minnesota or anywhere.
That's right.
We're not going anywhere. And next up, Rep. Lee Finke, my partner in justice.
Thank you, friend. And thank you all for being here and sharing your stories. It's an honor to stand here among all of you. My name is Lee Finke. My pronouns are she, her. I represent District 66A in the Minnesota House and serve as the House Chair of the Reproductive Freedom Caucus. And I don't have a lot more to add to what has been said up here. I would only say that history has never looked favorable upon any movement that tries to criminalize people based solely on the fact of who they are. And that is what is happening right now. That's what HF 12 is about. That is what every single executive order from the federal administration regarding trans people is about. It is a movement to eradicate from public life communities that are trans, non-binary, and two-spirit. But that's not my phrase, that's their phrase. We are going to stand for the rights of everyone, as we always have. That's what the DFL party is about. That's what the Minnesota Human Rights Act is about. It is not a question of whether or not 6 or 7-year-old trans girls should be allowed to play on their teams. That's what this bill says. If you are a 6-year-old trans girl, we are going to target you for exclusion. It is hateful, it is cruel, it is beyond cruel. And I would ask my colleagues across the aisle what it is they think history will say about this moment when they looked at a kid and said, because of who you are singled out and removed. I can think of no justification for such an act. I also just want to reiterate what several of our speakers have said here. The trans community is beautiful and powerful. It is the greatest joy of my life to be a part of it. And no one gets to tell us who we are. Not a president, not a House Speaker, not a billionaire, no one. Not your churches, nobody. We determine who we are. We have always existed. We always will. And I am grateful and proud to be here among these folks protecting our rights. And thank you all for standing strong with us today. I'll now pass it over to Representative Long. I don't know what your title is.
Who does these days? I'll be very brief. I just want to say thank you to those who came to share their stories today. And I think you heard the power and the beauty of youth sports, which is about teamwork. It is about competition. It is about bringing people together. And what this bill is saying is to all our kids, you can't play together. And to some of our kids, you can't play on any sports team at all. And we have a bill that the GOP is papering over a bit what the actual consequences would be. But if you look at it, they require that it be enforced. And what does enforcement mean to determine under their false definition who is and is not allowed to play on a girls' team? It means that every single kid who wants to play on these teams will have to go, what, a medical examination, a medical test? We are creating new barriers to participation when we have fought so hard for so long, from Title IX to the present, to try to get access to girls' sports. And yet this bill is setting us back. It's also setting us back in human rights. This is a clear violation of the Minnesota Human Rights Act. And Minnesota, the GOP right now can bring any bill that they want to the House floor. They have this power and this temporary one-vote margin that they have to choose any bill. And yet, this is the bill that they're choosing today. They're not trying to bring a bill to deal with our affordable housing crisis, to deal with the food shortages of eggs that we have, to deal with childcare. They are putting forward an ugly, divisive bill that is going to make it harder for all of us to play sports today. But the good news is that we're going to stand strong as a DFL team, and we're going to vote no today, and this bill will not pass the House. And with that, I will turn it over to Speaker Meredith Hortman.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who's already spoken, and I don't have much to add. I will really be echoing what Beth has already said. People of all ages deserve to be loved, accepted, and valued for who they are. At its core, this bill is about how we treat children. If a parent or coach doesn't think a female athlete fits their definition of femininity, she's too strong, she's too tall, she's too muscular, she's too fast, they get to decide that this child is going to be subject to an examination. This bill would allow children to be bullied both by adults in that environment and by other children for not meeting a particular definition of femininity. While Republicans push cruel and divisive bills like this, they're ignoring the real challenges that Minnesotans are facing every day, like the rising cost of childcare, housing, and healthcare. And instead of solving problems, they're fueling hate. We're standing together today to stop this bill. With that, we'll take questions.
Are all 66 DFL members on the same page?
They are.
A few of you mentioned other state houses pushing similar bills. Do you have those specific states? I'm just trying to push for anyone.
Sure. Kat Rohn, Outfront, Minnesota. There are a number of states, I believe almost half of the United States currently has bans or restrictions on transgender sports. There is also a bill that is moving in the U.S. Senate seeking to carve off Title IX funding for states that are inclusive of trans folks right now, as well as the executive order that was signed earlier this year.
A New York Times poll found that 66% of Democrats and the majority of Americans believe that transgender women should not participate in female sports. Can you respond to how you deal with that polling from Americans and with your stance on the bill today?
Yes. I think it's important to understand that there's more than one conversation that's taking place here. One is, if you ask that question about children, it is not the same, right? And I even noticed, that, well, what we see in reporting often happens, that they said, there's this rhetoric that's like, transgender women should not play in girls' sports, right? And you can see what's happening there, right? We're talking about girls' sports and we're talking about children. And what they're saying is, well, I've seen these transgender athletes, I don't want them on my daughter's team, right? I mean, this is a rhetorical move that is made to other and create threats out of, very specifically in this regard, transgender women and transgender girls. That's me, that's my community, and I know that the polling on sports, when you ask the question, should transgender women play girls' sports, the numbers are not good, but transgender women don't play girls' sports. Trans girls play girls' sports. Children play children's sports. So I think it's really important to recognize that the rhetoric is serving a purpose that belies what the attempt is. And I just want to add, for example, states that have banned transgender girls from playing sports, multiple of those states were unable to find a single girl who was trans anywhere in the state playing in youth sports. This problem simply does not exist. It is manufactured. Minnesota has been inclusive for 10 years. We've had zero problems. But we are doing this for political reasons. And when you lie about a community for long enough, people will believe it.
Representative, the point you just made, are there any estimation like how many transgender women are playing in sports in the state of Minnesota?
I don't have a number to say exactly. I say one thing about my community is we're not super fond about being counted by the government. But I will say that we know that as we have led the nation in trans participation in sports, we have also seen a corresponding rise, the highest rise in the country, of cisgender girls playing youth sports. The evidence across the country is clear. The more students you allow to play, the more students will play.
Is there ever a fairness issue in your eyes? Can there be somebody who does have, at the high school level, let's say, a distinct advantage based on?
Their biology?
Sure.
Sure. I would say that there are lots of people in sports who have biological advantages. They very, very rarely, if ever, have anything to do with their chromosomes, right? We see the unfair advantages in athletes all the time across sports. There are superstars, and that's not because their chromosomes are one way or another. If anybody wants to contribute to this, I don't think so. There's evidence. This has been studied. This is not a new issue. People can look at this. We can actually know the facts and know that it is untrue. But facts only matter if we agree that they matter. Does anyone want to? Yes.
I'd also like to add to that, being an athletic trainer and a transgender woman myself, Maggie Davis, she, her pronouns. I have trained athletes that have competed on the state level. I've trained athletes that have never learned to swim and have then, gone from basically doggy paddling to competing at a higher level. And it has to do with personality, support, coaching, and teamwork. If I had, and we've actually done this, or we've had boys from the football team come in and have a co-meet against our girls at the same time. Athletically, one would assume the boys should dominate, and yet they were crushed every time because it had to do with skill set. It had to do with the familiarity with their sport. Now, one could argue tit for tat all day long about this, but what it's doing is it's continuing to detract from the real issue here at hand, which is talking about how is it that our kids can play sports together, to grow together, and remember that the swimming pool, the athletic field, the wrestling mat, those are extensions of the classroom. Those are training areas and teaching children as well, and we need to remember that, and it's education first here in Minnesota.
Representative Long, you mentioned those medical examinations. Could you just walk me through your understanding of what that would look like under this bill?
So the bill says that the high school sports league is going to have to enforce it. And conveniently, they don't explain how, and that's because it is extremely unpopular to the public for this bill to be enforced. And you, if you are going to confirm the fake definition that they have in this bill of what it would take to play on a girls' sports team, you're going to have to do some medical examinations, some medical procedures. They define gender based on reproduction. You are going to have to determine whether these kids down to elementary school meet that definition. And that is something that would apply to every single kid who wants to participate in these sports.
It doesn't carve out anything for intersex either, does it? You know,
No, hi, my name is Sydney Jordan. I use she, her pronouns, and I represent 60A here. And I am the DFL lead on education policy here in the Minnesota House. And we asked those questions in committee. And a previous version of the bill outlined exactly what that enforcement mechanism would be. And it did include an anatomy examination. It included a chromosome, I'm conflating hormones and chromosomes. But it would analyze and force every child who wanted to play on teams to get a body examination and to have their chromosomes and hormones examined. And it doesn't include, and we asked questions about what about children who are intersex? How does this work? And the GOP, has amended their bill, so that is no longer in the bill. But they were very mum on the issue of enforcement. But this bill is very clear that enforcement will happen, and so it's really going to be up to the high school league to determine what that is. But previous iterations of this bill did include those three things.
Could someone speak to the amendments that are going to be coming up on the House floor on this? What we can expect out of that?
Yes, we will be bringing amendments forward to make sure that sports are safe for all students to participate in, regardless of their gender expression and identity.
Speaker Emerita, can you talk about Republicans bringing this bill forward and whether that will affect bipartisan negotiations going forward?
Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, we're going to have a budget for the state of Minnesota, and we will work together to make that happen. But this kind of activity does make it more difficult for us to work with our colleagues because it shows a meanness, a disregard of the human rights of all the people of the state of Minnesota. The other thing is it's just a waste of time. They know it's not going to pass. They know that if we pick those issues right now to work on that are bipartisan, that are important, that are supported, that will help the state move forward, that's the right thing to do. Representative Bakeberg was on Minnesota Public Radio this morning making those points exactly. We are anxious to work with our Republican colleagues on all sorts of issues like funding education. This is a distraction, it's a waste of time, and it will, I'm sure, make it more difficult, but we'll get there. I promise you, Leader Murphy, Governor Walz, and even the House of Representatives will work together to pass a budget for the state of Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
In front or
Photo.